Hey everyone, it's Dr. A, and in this video, we'll be continuing in our journey to understand the process of fertilization and the events that follow it. So as we continue our story, I'd like to put another term before you, which is gestation. Now, gestation is the amount of time that is spent or devoted to prenatal development, which occurs over a period of 9 months. And while we're here, let's define the term prenatal, which can simply be defined as before birth. Now, I understand that you may not be as familiar with this term, and that's largely because we use the term pregnancy to refer to this period of time. But gestation and pregnancy can be used interchangeably. Now, with these 9 months of gestation or pregnancy, the time is broken up into 3 units that we refer to as trimesters. So with this, we have the first, second, and third trimester. Now within the first trimester, we're referring to the first 3 months of pregnancy. And it's within this span of time that the basic structures and components of the major body systems are developed, making this a very crucial period of time during pregnancy. And within the second trimester, which is months 4 through 6, we have continued development of the body systems. And specifically during this time, we'll begin to find that there are changes to the proportions of the fetus, and it begins to take on a more normal human appearance. And in our third trimester, we're referring to months 7 through 9. And as we might expect, fetal growth continues and most of the organ systems have become fully functional. Now, one of the things that I'd like to elaborate on is the significance of the first trimester. And one of the first things I'd like to share with you is that the size of the fetus here is roughly about 3 inches long and weighs roughly half an ounce. But as we mentioned just a moment ago, this period of time is crucial to establish the foundational structures and components for developing the body systems. And it's for that reason that the first trimester is considered to be the most complex due to the number of physiological processes that occur during this period. So with this in mind, it makes sense why expectant mothers are asked to take a great deal of caution, doing things such as avoiding strenuous exercise, avoiding certain medications, being cautious of overheating, avoiding heavy lifting, and limiting caffeine intake, just to name a few. And the reason being is because these things may adversely impact the pregnancy. Now, what I'd like to do is provide you a numbered list of events that follow fertilization, and they include cleavage and blastocyst formation, implantation, placentation, and embryogenesis. And we'll delve into each of these topics or each of these components within this video. So first up is cleavage and blastocyst formation. Now, before proceeding further, I'd like to encourage you to view or review the video titled Understanding Fertilization, because it reviews steps 1 through 6, setting the foundation for what we'll talk about here. Now first, let's define the term cleavage. Here, it's a reference to a number of cell divisions that occur right after fertilization. And it's also here, in step 7, that we move into the first cleavage, which means that our zygote is in cytokinesis. And it's in the process of splitting into the 2 daughter cells that we see in step 8, which we refer to as the 2-cell stage. And within 10 to 14 hours, our 2-cell stage transitions into the 4-cell stage, which indicates that the cells have continued to replicate or duplicate themselves. And that's shown here in image number 9. And after 3 days, this blastomere, as shown in step 9, is converted into an early morula, pictured here in step 10. And the term morula is a name that indicates an appearance similar to that of a mulberry. Now, over time, this early morula experiences a continuation of cell replication and is then referred to as an advanced morula. And after this transformation, we ultimately end up with a blastocyst, noted here in step 12. Now, within the blastocyst, we have an inner core referred to as a blastocele, which represents the actual embryo. But this blastocyst as a whole is covered by an outer layer of tissue referred to as the trophoblast. Now, one thing of importance to note here is that it's this trophoblast, the cell layer, that takes on the responsibility of providing food and nourishment to the developing embryo. And after going through a series of changes, our blastocyst becomes exposed to the contents of the uterine cavity where it receives additional nourishment. And it's here within the uterine cavity that the blastocyst becomes implanted into the endometrium. So because we've just covered a great deal of information so far, let's revisit some of the steps we've just discussed so that we can get the gist of the timeline regarding cleavage and blastocyst formation. Now, the image shown here represents the right side of the uterine and or fallopian tubes, along with the uterine cavity. We'll also note here that there is one of the ovaries shown as well. Now, this process first began with the ovarian cycle, producing a secondary oocyte, which is released from an ovary. And this secondary oocyte is released into the uterine tubes where it awaits the male sperm for fertilization. Now, once fertilized, we then see that day 1 is marked by the 2-cell stage, which progresses by day 2 into the 4-cell stage. And by day 3, we see the early morula. And notice that what we're seeing here is the progression in the location along the uterine tube of what becomes the blastocyst. So by day 4, our early morula has become the advanced morula. And by day 6, the advanced morula is now referred to as the blastocyst. Now, it's when we have a blastocyst that the process of cleavage and blastocyst formation ends. But as we'll see momentarily, this process will continue in what we refer to as implantation. So now that we're at the process of implantation, and it's this process that occurs between day 6 and day 7. And this process is noted by the blastocyst adjoining to and adhering to the uterine wall. And during this phase, we begin to see a rapid increase in cell division, which expands the surface and thickness of the trophoblast. Now, during days 8 and 9, the trophoblast begins to bury itself into the endometrium and is no longer just simply attached to the uterine cavity. And although it's not shown here, by day 10, we'll begin to see further development of the trophoblast within the endometrium. Now, between days 10 and 12, as the trophoblast is further embedded within the endometrium, the endometrial capillaries, that is, the capillaries in the endometrium, are broken down. And as a result, maternal blood supply begins to flow into the trophoblast. Now, at this point within the blastocyst, we have a few things of importance to note. First, we have a fluid-filled chamber referred to as the amniotic cavity, and we also have the presence of what we call 3 germ layers, which include the ectoderm, which is in direct contact with the amniotic cavity, and the middle layer, which is referred to as the mesoderm, and the deepest layer, referred to as the endoderm. And what's unique here is that each of these 3 layers serve as the foundation for the human body. Now, just for reference, here's a list of contributions made by the 3 germ layers we've just identified. The ectoderm is responsible for the production of things such as hair, skin, our brain, the spinal cord, the pituitary gland, our nasal passages, the mouth, anus, and salivary glands. And the mesoderm is primarily known for the role it plays in developing large components of our body systems, such as the muscular, endocrine, lymphatic, cardiovascular, and reproductive systems. And last but not least, the endoderm is credited with the development of key organs such as the thymus, pancreas, urinary bladder in both male and female gametes. Now, please keep in mind that this is not an all-inclusive list. These 3 germ layers play a huge role in the development of other parts of the body as well. So, following implantation, we have placentation, which literally means formation of the placenta. And this is made possible because of the formation of what we refer to as extra-embryonic membranes that are formed by the 3 germ layers, the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. So in the image that you see here, we're going to be looking at a time lapse of the cellular activity taking place within the 3 germ layers. And keep in mind that it's roughly in our 2nd week where we begin to see the process of placentation, and specifically where we have the early development of 3 out of the 4 extra-embryonic membranes. That includes the amnion, the chorion, and the yolk sac. Now, the first of these extra-embryonic membranes is the yolk sac, which has been present since around the 9th or 10th day after fertilization. And the development of this structure begins within the mesoderm. And it's here at the yolk sac that this becomes a critical site for the development of blood cells. Now, development of the amnion takes place within the ectoderm and mesoderm. And over time, this will become the amniotic cavity, which contains amniotic fluid. And its job is to surround and provide protection and support for the developing embryo. And the 3rd extra-embryonic membrane that we see is the development of the chorion. And the chorion is the site that we noted earlier where capillary formation within the trophoblast begins. In week 3, we continue to see cellular adaptations over time, such as an enlargement of the yolk sac, amnion, and chorion. And within this 3rd week, we also begin to see development of the allantois, which is the 4th extra-embryonic membrane. And what's unique about this structure is that it begins to give rise to the development of the urinary bladder. In our 4th week, we begin to see a clearer picture of the developing embryo, and this is noted by what we refer to as the head fold and the tail fold. And just as you might imagine, it's the head fold that becomes the head and or skull, and the tail fold that becomes the backside. We call the development of these components or of this process embryogenesis. Now, it's in the 5th week that we also get to see the development of what we refer to as the yolk stalk and the body stalk, and both are being pictured here in unison. Now, the yolk stalk is the connection between the embryo and the yolk sac, while the body stalk is the connection between the embryo and the chorion. Now, also in view here is the chorionic villi, which is the border between the fetal and maternal blood supply. And as mentioned a moment ago, we'll eventually see a fusion of the yolk stalk and the body stalk together, making what we refer to as the umbilical stalk. And the umbilical stalk ultimately becomes the umbilical cord. And so if we take a look at the 10-week mark, we begin to see continued cellular changes, such as an expanded amniotic cavity and development of the placenta from the chorion, along with the development of the umbilical cord. Now, one of the things we need to explore as we unpack the events of the first trimester is the uniqueness and importance of the placenta. And one of the first things that we'll need to explore about this topic is the circulation of blood at the placenta. So here's how it works. Deoxygenated blood, or blood that has already made its deposit of oxygen and nutrients to the embryo, needs to become reoxygenated. So deoxygenated blood is transported from the embryo to the placenta via 2 paired umbilical arteries. And as a result, oxygenated blood returns to the fetus via a single umbilical vein. In addition, the placenta serves as the site for gas exchange, nutrients, and waste between the child and mother. Another function that we can attribute to the placenta is that it serves as an endocrine system organ, meaning that it's responsible for the release of hormones. And specifically, there are several hormones from this organ, but the one that I'd like us to give our attention to first is human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. And I'd like to give attention to this one because it's this hormone that's responsible for being the telltale sign of pregnancy. In fact, it's the presence of this hormone that is picked up from pregnancy tests that collect urine or blood samples. And if this hormone is present within either of these samples, we can be certain that one is pregnant. Now, it's important to note too that the placenta plays a vital role in the release and or regulation of other important hormones that will be of importance over time. So let's talk about just a few of those now. The first of these is the hormone HPL, which stands for human placental lactose, and the second hormone is placental prolactin. Uniquely, these hormones prepare the mammary glands for the production of breast milk. And a third hormone by the name of relaxin helps to do what it almost sounds like it does. It helps to relax the pelvis by expanding it during delivery, and it also helps with dilation of the cervix. Well, thank you for watching this video. I hope it's been helpful, and if you indeed found value in it, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.